Tom Hagen sat at the Corleone family table for 2 films, loyal, brilliant, and forever on the outside looking in. Then Francis Ford Coppola let him vanish from the story without a death scene, a funeral, or even a single line of explanation. But the real man, widely believed to have inspired Tom Hagen, did not vanish. He died on his apartment floor in Marina City, Chicago, holding a vacuum cleaner, and his story makes The Godfather look tame. His name was Murray Humphreys, and this is the ending the movie never showed you. Mario Puzo never confirmed a single real-life inspiration for Tom Hagen. Mob historians have pointed to several figures, including Gambino family consigliere Joseph Gallo and Los Angeles crime boss Frank DeSimone, who started his career as a licensed attorney before becoming a mafia don. But the parallels to Murray Humphreys are the most striking. A non-Italian outsider who rose to the inner circle of one of America's most dangerous criminal organizations. A man who believed in brains over bullets. The similarities are hard to ignore. But to understand why those parallels matter, you have to understand what it meant to be a non-Italian inside the American mafia during the 1920s. It meant you were tolerated at best and killed at worst. The old bosses from Sicily did not trust outsiders with anything more important than driving the getaway car. You could work for them, you could make them money, but you would never sit at the table where the real decisions were made. Murray Humphreys was Welsh. Born Llewellyn Morris Humphreys in 1899 on North Clark Street in Chicago, he came from a working-class immigrant family from the village of Carno in mid-Wales. No Sicilian blood, no family ties to the Italian underworld, and zero reason to believe he would ever amount to anything in organized crime. And here is an eerie detail worth remembering. That same North Clark Street would later become the site of one of the most infamous massacres in American criminal history. But we will get to that. In The Godfather, the non-Italian outsider hits a glass ceiling that he never breaks through. The Sicilian drug dealer Solozzo, known as the Turk, dismisses Tom Hagen openly for not being Sicilian. Sonny rolls his eyes when Hagen counsels restraint. And eventually, in the most cutting scene of the trilogy, Michael Corleone looks at the man who was raised as his brother and tells him flat out that he is not a wartime consigliere. Michael pushes Hagen aside when the bullets start flying because in his chunk, the adopted outsider does not have the stomach for real violence. That scene defined Tom Hagen forever in the minds of audiences around the world. The brilliant mind who was not tough enough when things got ugly. But the real Murray Humphreys, Diable Roy, didn't hit a glass ceiling. He shattered it. By the time he was in his early 30s, Humphreys was sitting near the absolute top of the Chicago outfit, right alongside Al Capone himself. And he wasn't even the only non-Italian up there. The outfit's leadership included Jake Greasy Thumb Guzik, who was Russian Jewish, and Eddie Dutch Vogel, who was German. But Humphreys became the most prominent and most feared of all of them. In 1933, with Capone behind bars in a federal penitentiary, the chief investigator for the state attorney's office called Murray Humphreys public enemy number 1 and the czar of business rackets in Chicago. So how did a Welsh kid with no connections climb that high? Because Capone recognized something in Humphreys that his Italian captains didn't have. Capone himself once said, "Anybody can use a gun, but the hump uses his head. He can shoot if he has to, but he likes to negotiate with cash when he can." While the Italian captains were settling decades-old grudges from villages back in Sicily, wasting time and bodies on feuds that had nothing to do with business, Humphreys was thinking 3 moves ahead inside the outfit's headquarters on the South Side. He cared about one thing: money. And he understood how to make more of it than anyone in the organization had ever imagined. But here's what makes that even more incredible. Humphreys dropped out of elementary school at age 7 to sell newspapers on the streets of Chicago and support his family. He never went to college. He was never a licensed attorney, but a Chicago judge named Jack Murray took an interest in young Humphreys when the kid was 13 and already standing before the bench on petty theft charges. The judge tried to steer him toward a legal career. Humphreys took the judge's last name as his own, which is how Llewellyn became Murray, and spent the rest of his life teaching himself law from thick legal textbooks. One of his favorite sayings was, "The difference between guilt and innocence in any court is who gets to the judge first with the most." That self-taught legal mind would reshape the entire Chicago underworld. Because while Al Capone was making front-page headlines running bootleg liquor through the streets of Chicago, Humphreys was doing something that would prove far more profitable. He was taking over the labor unions. Think about what that actually meant. In the 1920s and the 1930s, unions controlled everything that moved through a major American city. The milk drivers delivering to every home in Chicago, the laundry trucks serving every hotel and restaurant on Michigan Avenue, the teamsters hauling goods from the rail yards to the storefronts. If you controlled those unions, you did not need to rob a single business. You could walk into any company in Chicago, calmly explain that their deliveries might experience some unfortunate delays, and collect a check every single month forever. Humphreys turned extortion into a subscription service. Sounds ridiculous, right? But it worked. He transformed the Chicago outfit from a gang of street-level thugs into something that operated more like a Fortune 500 company. As author Gus Russo documented in his book on the Chicago outfit, Humphreys created corporations in the dry cleaning business, took control of unions and business associations, then set up protection rackets that generated billions for the organization over the following decades. He even created a pension system for the families of members who were incarcerated or killed. The mob went from shaking down speakeasies for pocket change to controlling legitimate industries across the entire Midwest. But that corporate genius wasn't even the most surprising thing about Murray Humphreys. Remember the scene where Michael Corleone tells Tom Hagen he is not a wartime consigliere? The line that defined Hagen as the man who could not handle violence? The real Murray Humphreys would have found that hilarious. While Humphreys genuinely preferred negotiation and bribery over bloodshed inside the outfit's operations, he was no stranger to violence when he deemed it necessary. Some mob historians and law enforcement officials have credited him with involvement in planning one of the most infamous acts of gang warfare in American history, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which occurred on February 14th, 1929. 7 members of the Bugs Moran gang were gunned down inside a garage on North Clark Street, the same street where Humphreys had been born 30 years earlier, by gunmen dressed as Chicago police officers. Now, his precise role in the massacre remains debated among historians. Some accounts place him as a key planner. Others describe his involvement as more peripheral. No court records or direct witness testimony ever tied him personally to the execution. But what is beyond dispute is that Humphreys operated at the highest level of an organization that sanctioned extreme violence when it served strategic goals. He didn't shy away from war. He just preferred to win it before the other side realized they were fighting. He didn't go to the mattresses because by the time his enemies figured out what was happening, he had already bribed the judges who would hear their cases and paid off the police captains who patrolled their neighborhoods. If you're finding this story as wild as I think you are, hit subscribe. I cover stories like this every single week. Now, you'd think the Union takeover and the violence would be Humphreys' biggest legacy. But there's something he did that arguably had an even bigger impact on American criminal history. Murray Humphreys is the reason every mobster in every congressional hearing has said the words, "I refuse to answer on the grounds that it may incriminate me." Before Humphreys, you could plead the Fifth Amendment in a courtroom. That was established law. But nobody in the criminal world had ever tried using it before Congress. When gangsters got called before Senate committees and congressional hearings in Washington, they tried to talk their way out of trouble. They would charm the room, or worse, lie under oath. And they kept getting caught. Perjury charges stacked up. Contempt charges piled on. Convictions were built entirely on their own words. Humphreys, the school dropout who taught himself law from textbooks in his apartment, saw this pattern and realized the Fifth Amendment's protections could extend beyond the courtroom walls. According to Gus Russo, Humphreys gave his outfit associates index cards with the exact words to say when the next congressional hearing came around. The Chicago guys all pleaded the Fifth, and the committee members on the dais in Washington were stunned. They told the mobsters they could not do that, and Humphreys interrupted and said, "I think we can. You are going to find out we can." He was right. The committee did their legal research and confirmed that his interpretation was correct. Every single time you have watched a mob movie where the gangster sits stone-faced behind a microphone in a wood-paneled Senate hearing room and refuses to answer, you are watching Murray Humphreys' playbook in action. A self-educated Welsh immigrant's kid outsmarted the entire United States Congress. You cannot make that up. But none of that prepared him for what happened on November 23rd, 1965. FBI agents showed up at Humphreys' apartment on the 51st floor of the Marina City East Tower, the iconic twin corncob towers overlooking the Chicago River. They were there to make the arrest. Humphreys, 66 years old and already suffering from a heart condition, pulled a .38 caliber revolver on the FBI agents. One of them reportedly told him, "Murray, for Christ's sake, you know we are FBI agents, put down the gun." They overpowered the aging mobster, handcuffed him, and took the key to his safe by force from his pants pocket. They took him downtown. The charge was perjury, lying to a federal grand jury. After decades of outsmarting the entire federal government of the United States, the thing that finally got Murray Humphreys was his own words under oath. A federal grand jury handed down the indictment that same day. Humphreys' friend Maury Norman posted his bail at the federal courthouse. Humphreys went back to the Marina City apartment. A man who had survived Al Capone's inner circle during Prohibition, who had walked away untouched from the bloodiest gang wars of the 20th century, who had spent decades as a ghost that the most powerful law enforcement agency on earth could not catch. And that evening, he was pacing around the same room where the FBI agents had wrestled him to the ground just hours earlier. He was consumed by a kind of stress that no rival gangster, no hired assassin, no turf war in Chicago had ever managed to inflict on him. He was not afraid of a hit contract or a rival family. He was afraid of a courtroom date he knew he could not outmaneuver. He was vacuuming the floor of his apartment, a nervous habit, something to do with his hands, while his mind raced through every possible legal outcome. At approximately 8:30 that evening, his brother Ernest walked into the Marina City apartment and found Murray lying face down on the floor, fully clothed, dead. The Cook County coroner ruled the cause of death as acute coronary occlusion, a blood clot in the heart confirmed by autopsy. Some suspected foul play given Humphreys' long list of enemies, but the medical evidence pointed to a natural death triggered by extraordinary stress. A Chicago newspaper columnist named Mike Royko wrote what might be the perfect epitaph. He said Humphreys died of unnatural causes, a heart attack, because for a man who had survived everything Murray Humphreys survived, dying of natural causes was the most unnatural thing imaginable. Tom Hagen disappeared from The Godfather without a funeral or an explanation, largely because Robert Duvall and the producers of Part 3 could not agree on a salary. Duvall often said Tom Hagen was one of his favorite roles. He brought something to that character that no other actor could have, a quiet stillness that made you believe this man really had survived decades inside the most dangerous family in America. On February 15th, 2026, Robert Duvall died peacefully at his home in Virginia. He was 95 years old. His family asked the world to honor his memory by watching a great film or telling a good story around a table with friends. So here is a story worth telling. The real man behind Tom Hagen was stranger, sadder, and more poetic than anything a screenwriter could have invented. A Welsh kid from the slums of Chicago who spent decades proving that intelligence beats brutality inside the Chicago outfit, finally broken by the weight of the one institution he could never fully bribe or outsmart: the American courtroom. And the cruelest irony of all, Murray Humphreys taught every gangster in America how to stay silent before Congress. He handed them index cards with the exact words to say. He built a wall of silence that protected the entire Chicago outfit for years. But a federal grand jury is not a congressional hearing. The Fifth Amendment tricks that worked in Washington did not save him in a Chicago courtroom. And when it mattered most, Humphreys said something under oath that gave the government the weapon they needed. The man who taught the mob to shut up got taken down by his own voice. The Godfather showed us what a fictional consigliere looked like, sitting politely at the Corleone family table. Murray Humphreys showed us what the real one was capable of when he stood up from it. And Robert Duvall made sure we would never forget the quiet power of the man caught between both worlds. You can outrun the guns, you can outthink the bosses, you can outlast every federal investigation they throw at you, but you cannot outrun your own heart. If you want to see another story Hollywood got completely wrong about the real American mafia, that video is on screen now.